Good morning. Thanks for joining us here on The Real Story. I'm Sara Sanchez in for Emma Wolfhorst. This morning we're talking about laws for Connecticut's children, from year-round support to mental health and development, community programs, and questions about going back to school and the resources our kids are going to have. Joining me to talk about it all and give us insight on the state capitol conversations happening right now, Representative Linehan, co-chair of the Committee on Children. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So we have a lot to talk about when it comes to our children, especially post-pandemic.
Sure.
I know you and I are both moms, right? And there are so many teachers out there, so many educators and people who work with children who say that there is a huge gap, there is huge deficit in children's mental health support. So what's going to be your main priority this year?
When it comes to children's mental health supports, first of all, before we even go back into session, just as a legislator and someone who is an advocate for children and children's mental health, I think one of the things we need to talk about is when we go back to school, how we can support our kids in terms of anxiety and depression about the new school year. There's something called the Sunday Scaries, right? So how do we help our kids go from summertime and time off to having a very successful year and kind of dampen the anxiety that we've seen children have, not just since the pandemic, it was just exacerbated by the pandemic, but the anxiety that we're seeing in kids, it leads to chronic absenteeism, it leads to just, even if you're in school, being outside the classroom, what supports are needed in school. So I think as we head back to school, there's the importance of educating parents how to best help their kids. And then from that, we can decide what laws we need to put into practice the next year and what funding we have to give the next year. And so it's constantly evolving.
No, teachers in school, administrators, they say they've needed support from the state even before the pandemic. And like you said, it was just exacerbated with the COVID pandemic. Yet it seems like our schools, our children, childcare, all that's kind of pushed on the back burner a lot of times, the needs of our children. So how do you take that message to the Capitol and say our kids need help? What sort of data are you bringing? What sort of research are you bringing? What are you seeing?
So first I will say that I do believe you were correct, that there has been kind of a, people have been glazing over the needs of kids until the pandemic. Up in the legislature back in 2020 and 2021, I think that was the main issue that we were all talking about. And then we passed the landmark Children's Mental Health Bill. And within that, we actually did things like we created trauma coordinators throughout the state of Connecticut, so that we have kind of a train the trainer model. So we have these coordinators that are going into districts and training professionals, whether they be mental health professionals in schools or administration, on how to handle the childhood trauma that they're seeing, which can be different from district to district, area to area. The trauma that we see in kids in urban areas is going to be different than suburban or rural. So these are trauma coordinators that are really focused on the needs of the kids in their area, and then they can train the staff on how to get these kids the help they need so that they can have their most successful year yet.
I imagine, too, there are a lot of resources out there for parents that they're not able to get for whatever reason, right? Or that they don't even know is out there. We know that there's the 211 law, or 211 line. You talked about the trauma coordinators.
Yes.
What are things that you want to get the message out to families and say, this is in place, this is what we're working for, and this is how we can get your child help?
You know, I'll say that pre-pandemic, I would absolutely agree, and I was one of those parents. Where do I go to get help? There aren't enough doctors. There are waiting lists. There are psychiatrists who are cash only. This isn't helpful. So over the past few years, the Committee on Children, for which I co-chair, we did write some very good legislation to help that. Among those things are anytime a child goes to the emergency room for any reason, break a leg, having an asthma attack, they leave that emergency room with a list of mental health professionals in their area so that they can take advantage of that. Because we know that even a kid with a broken leg can have anxiety, even if they're not coming to the emergency room for that. So parents have that in their My Chart, or they have a printout. That's actually proven to be very, very successful. Additionally, we actually put together some urgent care crisis centers specifically for children's mental health. So parents can utilize that. It's like an emergency room solely for mental health issues. And then, of course, we have some wonderful nonprofits around the state. So we have really worked to open access for our kids. But I think the main thing is that if any parent has a child who is experiencing a mental health crisis, first of all, 211 is always great to call because they can have someone come out to your home. And it's not like an ambulance comes and it alerts the neighbors. It's actually a mental health professional in their regular old sedan coming in and talking to your child to assess whether or not this is an emergency, a crisis situation, and then refer you to treatment, which is really fantastic. So I urge everyone to please utilize 211. And secondly, talk to your school district. We have passed laws that have really kind of spelled out for school districts how to get the kids in their district the mental health help that they need. So these are individuals in your district who know of who is in the area that can help you immediately. So it's really about using the people that are already around you and just asking the right questions.
A lot of these resources you're talking about are going to cost money. And we know that, right? That we had these ARPA funds that went into place, and but that was a one-time deal. That money is not there. We do have a budget surplus too, and I think a lot of families, a lot of constituents might think, but we have money. Why can't we put that towards things that we want, right, towards our families? What do you say to constituents that do think that a piece of the pie should be going to families?
I will say, first of all, we got you. Because those ARPA funds, the federal ARPA funds, there are guidelines into how we can use them. We wanted to be sure that we were not using the ARPA funds in a way that it would create a hole once they're gone. So those ARPA funds were used to build the infrastructure for the help that these kids need. We put more beds together. We opened these urgent crisis centers. So the ARPA funds actually very much helped, but now they are sustainable by the budget. And so I need to say thank you to Governor Lamont and to Speaker Ritter, who worked with us on the ability to do that and to really make children's mental health a priority.
Can we also talk about the child tax credit?
Absolutely.
Right? Okay, let's talk about that, because we know that that's really stalled on the federal level, and that's going to translate to thousands of dollars that struggling families are going to have to come up with, right? And we also know that families are really struggling right now.
They are.
So can you break down where Connecticut stands on that and any help that families can get from the state level?
Absolutely. So right now, I can only speak for my caucus, the Democratic caucus. Instituting the child tax credit is a priority when possible. Here's the issue. The issue is that, yes, we have a budget surplus, but our budget surplus is really due to the fiscal guardrails that we put in place back in 2017. And with that comes the spending cap, and it comes the volatility cap. Just to put it in plain English as easy as possible, when the stock market is great, we're flush with cash. But now we're starting to see that maybe things are evening out. So any ability for us to institute the child tax credit, we're going to have to take a look at whether or not we can do so on a short-term basis or that we can keep it going. It's a little scary to think that if we institute the child tax credit, do we have to take it away? So last year we looked at doing that, and we've opted to kind of wait to see how the economy evens out, if we are still really flush with cash. We don't quite know. But I can say, as for the Democratic caucus, instituting the child tax credit is a priority that we really want to be able to make happen. Is right now, we're not going to know until we get into session and see where we are in terms of our revenues.
I know that one of your major focuses, and we've already briefly touched on this, right, is the prevention when it comes to child sex abuse. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that and what that looks like for you?
Absolutely. As the co-chair of the Committee on Children, this has been really my number one issue, is rooting out adult sexual misconduct towards children. And while I don't have the ability in my committee to strengthen punishments for abusers, although I believe that is extremely important, and I will continue to fight for that as long as I'm breathing. But in my committee, the cognizance I have is about the prevention. And so we've been working really diligently on educating people. What is grooming, right? So a couple of years ago, we put together some information for boards of ed as to what grooming looks like. We've now made more information regarding grooming and bystander training for mandated reporters in schools, which is really important. But I think one of the most important things that we did was we were able to add questions regarding adult sexual misconduct to school climate surveys, where children take these, it's actually high school students, take these anonymous surveys to tell us if they have ever been a victim of adult sexual misconduct. And then we need to make sure that those kids have the resources available to them, and that the staff and teachers understand what it is, what it looks like, and how to report it. So all of these things work together. But I mean, every month there's a new issue of adult sexual misconduct. Yep. We instituted background checks for coaches. Now, after what has gone on recently at the Park and Rec Department, I forget the town, but here in Connecticut, we need to look at how we can actually strengthen protections for kids in parks and recs and those sports in addition to schools. So there's still a lot of work cut out for me, but this is still going to be one of my main issues.
Yeah, I can't think of the town off the top of my head either, but we have extensively covered it. So now I'm like, okay. But we also got to talk about how tech ties into that, because you and I know that that is a dangerous avenue. And also I want to say too that it's good that you're here talking about this, because I think a lot of parents, if they know that their kids are being asked those questions, or there's these hard decisions being made about tech for them, we want to know why this is in place.
So first of all, you hit the nail right on the head, right? This is a difficult discussion to have.
Yeah.
This makes everybody feel uncomfortable and nobody wants to talk about it, but evil lurks in the dark. So the more we can shine light on it, the more we can stop this from happening. With that comes social media.
Yep.
2 years ago, I did pass legislation that funded the ability for more local municipal police departments to have the tech to go undercover online in order to see who in Connecticut was contacting children. That's going to be important to keep. The Meriden Police Department, I want to give a shout out to them because they've done an amazing job and have made quite a few arrests based on that kind of undercover work. So they're wonderful. But additionally, we have to look at how tech plays a role in hiding abuse. So this coming session, I will have a bill in conjunction with the Banking Committee that looks at cash apps and Venmo and the ability to pull back a parent can pull back someone's account, shut down a cash account when they find out their child has it. So this 2 years ago, but just went into effect July 1. We passed a bill that says if a person under the age of 16, I believe, has a social media account and the parent finds out about it, the social media company must immediately shut down that account when asked by a parent or guardian. We now want to do the same thing for cash apps, because what we have found is that there are children who are at risk for abuse, who are at risk for trafficking, who are being paid through social cash apps. that is illegal. You have to be 18. You have to have an adult open this account for you. And I actually had a constituent who came to me because she found out her child had this account and they wouldn't shut it down. And it was not an account that the parent had opened for her child. And she could not find out what adult over the age of 18 opened that Cash App account for her child. And this child was at risk for trafficking. So this is a major issue. Yeah. Tech plays a huge role in the sexual abuse of children, and we need to attack it from every angle.
Yeah, there's lots of conversations in that, and we're definitely gonna have to have you back on to talk about tech, because I think we just opened a little can of worms.
Oh, I have so much to say.
There's so much more, and we know that.
There's so much more. And look, the main point that really needs to be taken away from this is that we need to discuss sexual abuse in the open. We have people who say, we all want to end sexual abuse, but they're so uncomfortable talking about it. I'd love to do an entire show about how to talk to your kids about that. There's role playing that needs to be done. How will you handle a situation, when your child's put in that situation? So the more we talk about it, the better.
Absolutely, I agree. All right, thank you, Representative Liz
Thank you so much.
Linehan. We appreciate it. Well, still more to come here on The Real Story. We're talking about our state's native land and tribal traditions. Native Americans from across the U.S. are coming to Connecticut next weekend for Mohegan's annual Wigwam Festival. But how does the tribe stay connected to who they are? And for non-natives, who are the Mohegans? From art to language, economic contributions, and historical relearning. We've got a lot to cover, so stay with us.